February 1971. Hexham, Northumberland, Northern England. A cold, grey town where the sky always seemed 2 shades too dark and the wind carried the memory of something older than weather. At 3 Reed Avenue, 2 young boys, Colin and Leslie Robson, ages 11 and 9, were digging in the garden behind their home, looking for buried treasure or worms or anything that might hold a spark of adventure in a town where nothing ever happened. And then they found them. 2 small stone heads, roughly carved, about the size of fists, weathered, pitted, but unmistakably human in shape. One was grinning, the other scowling, frowning with deep, sunken eyes and sharp cheekbones. They looked ancient, but the boys didn't think artifact. They thought cool toys. They took them inside, placed them on a windowsill in the living room. By nightfall, their house would never be the same again. The Robsons were ordinary, working class, religious, quiet, unassuming. But from the moment the heads entered their home, strange things began to happen. It started with cold spots, sudden, unnatural chills that would sweep through the room like someone opening a door that wasn't there. Then the doors started slamming. Not from wind, not from drafts, and not always attached to their frames. One morning, Colin's bedroom door slammed shut so hard it cracked the plaster. Another night, the bathroom door locked itself from the inside. But no one was in the bathroom. The mother, Mrs. Robson, began to complain about being watched. When alone in the kitchen, she'd turn and catch sight of a shape at the corner of her eye, tall, dark, too big to be one of the boys. But when she looked directly, nothing. Dishes fell from shelves. Footsteps echoed in empty rooms. Then came the creature. On a quiet Thursday night, their next-door neighbor, Mrs. Dodd, was in bed reading when she heard scratching outside her bedroom door. She assumed it was the cat, until the door opened, and something walked in. Her description would later become infamous. It was the size of a man, but not a man. Hairy, tall, moved like it had forgotten how to walk like us. I thought it was a werewolf. I really did. It looked right at me. Then it turned and left. The creature didn't harm her. But after it left, she realized the door had never opened, not physically. It had just stopped being closed. She packed a bag that night and never returned to the house. Back at 3 Reed Avenue, the boys started having matching nightmares. Dreams of running through long, underground tunnels. Always being chased. Always hearing growling, but never seeing the source. One night, Leslie woke up screaming, claiming he saw the grinning head smiling on its own, glowing faintly on the shelf. Their father dismissed it, until the head was found the next morning, moved to the kitchen table. No one had touched it. A local historian was contacted. Frank Hyde, an amateur archaeologist, came to examine the heads. He was intrigued, said they appeared Celtic or Anglo-Roman, possibly even older. But he admitted something else. They're too expressive for their age. The craftsmanship is crude, but the faces, they're intentional. They were meant to scare. He took the heads home to examine them. That night, his wife suffered a sudden asthma attack, first one in over 20 years. The next morning, his cat vanished. The day after that, one of the heads went missing. They found it inside the fireplace, covered in soot, though no one had lit a fire. Frank returned the heads to the Robsons immediately. Soon, the case reached Dr. Anne Ross, a respected Celtic scholar in London. She agreed to study them. Within 48 hours of the heads arriving at her home, her daughter saw a half-man creature standing in their hallway. It didn't move like anything natural, she said. It turned its head toward me and I heard it say something. But it wasn't using words. Dr. Ross, a skeptic by training, became visibly disturbed. She returned the heads and later published a theory. These are not just archaeological items. They are ritual objects, possibly used in pre-Christian protective rites. But sometimes protective magic needs something to protect against. And sometimes what you trap doesn't stay trapped forever. The heads changed hands again. One researcher, in private, said, "When they're nearby, I dream in languages I've never heard." Another claimed his dog refused to enter the room where the heads were stored. Yet another said he could hear scratching in the walls whenever the heads were together. Eventually, they vanished. Not stolen, not lost, just gone. The last known person to possess them refused to speak to reporters. When asked, he said, "They were never meant to be unearthed. Some things are buried for a reason." The Robson family moved out within a year. The house still stands. New owners report nothing unusual, except for the occasional scratching sound behind the walls, always around 3 a.m., always followed by a faint sound of laughter. March 1971, just weeks after the discovery, the 2 stone heads were passed from the Robson home to the Dodd family's cousin, who lived 2 miles away. They were curious skeptics. They'd heard the stories about doors slamming, shadows, and that thing Mrs. Dodd claimed to have seen. But they didn't believe in monsters. They wanted proof, so they took the heads in. They got their proof in less than 48 hours. The first sign was the dog. A large black Labrador, calm, protective, never aggressive. The day the heads arrived, it wouldn't enter the house. It growled at the box they came in. That night, it howled for over an hour, staring at a corner of the living room where nothing was. Then it vanished. No signs of struggle, no sound, just gone. They found one paw print in the flower bed and nothing else. The father, Edward Hume, tried to rationalize it. Said maybe the dog ran away, but he was sweating, pale, because that same night he saw something. Standing in the backyard, just past the tree line, a figure, too large to be human, upright, covered in dark hair, its head low, its eyes glowing faintly yellow, turned its shoulders, like it was about to come forward. But when he turned on the light, it was gone. Only its footprints remained, deep and wide with claw marks in the soil. By the third night, the family was sleeping with the lights on. The youngest son said he saw the smiling head move by itself, hopping off a shelf and landing softly on the floor. They packed the heads back into a shoebox, locked it in the shed. That night, the shed door ripped off its hinges. The heads were back in the house, placed neatly on the fireplace mantel. No one in the family had done it. The heads were returned once again, this time to a local museum for safekeeping. Staff stored them in a locked drawer, under catalog ID number 237HEX. A week later, a janitor was found unconscious in the archives. When he woke, he claimed, "I saw a man made of stone. He pointed at me. Then the room got cold and black. His hair had turned gray overnight. He refused to enter the archives again." Meanwhile, sightings of the beast spread beyond Hexham. A farmer in nearby Carlisle claimed he saw a creature rooting through a barn, standing on two legs, its face like a melted human. In York, a police constable reported hitting something big with his car just after midnight. The bumper cracked. No blood, but a deep scratch too high to be from a deer. All sightings had one thing in common. They occurred exactly 3 days after the heads changed hands. And each time, the witnesses described a smell, like wet stone and something old, like dead leaves under water. Then a new voice entered the story. A local Anglican priest, Father Gregory Sloane, wrote an anonymous letter to a regional newspaper. "I've seen things like this before. The heads are not man-made. They are not even carvings. They are vessels. What was sealed inside them is not something that ever had a name, and you've let it walk again." The museum, growing increasingly nervous, arranged to have the heads studied by a team from Newcastle University. But when the courier came to pick them up, the catalog drawer was empty. No sign of forced entry, just a smear of dirt on the inside wall of the cabinet and one claw mark. The museum closed its archives for a week. No official statement was ever released. In April, a letter arrived at the home of archaeologist Frank Hyde, who had briefly studied the heads. It was unsigned. Inside, a Polaroid photo of the grinning head, a burned map of Hexham with one street circled, and the words, "It's looking for the last one." That same night, a local child went missing, never found. The connection was never officially made. But the beast was seen in the neighborhood hours before by a milkman on early delivery. He described it as tall, broad, like a bear, but with a face that looked carved. It stared at me like I'd broken a rule. A week later, 2 boys at a school in Prudhoe unearthed a third object while digging near the athletic field. Another stone head, frowning, slightly smaller. They didn't bring it home. They left it in the dirt. The next morning, it was gone. But in its place, a set of footprints leading into the trees, barefoot, massive, with claws. April 1971. The stone heads had now passed through 4 homes, a museum, and the hands of multiple researchers. And wherever they went, the beast followed. People were beginning to talk, quietly at first, then publicly. The press called it Hexham's curse. The Robsons had left town. The Humes stopped speaking to reporters. And the heads? They reappeared again. This time, they were mailed anonymously to Professor Roger Iles, a folklore specialist at Newcastle University. No return address. Just a short typed note inside the parcel. You study what you think is old. Study this. It's older than belief. The heads were unwrapped in his office. A week later, he was speaking in his sleep. His wife recorded the audio. The language was unknown. Phonetic, guttural. Structured like speech, but not English, not Celtic, not Latin. It matched no language in his research database. But there was something worse. When played back, the recording triggered electrical malfunctions. Bulbs flickered. Tape hissed. One student fainted. Professor Iles became obsessed. He said the heads weren't meant to be idols, they were receivers. Not made to be worshipped, but to wake something that listens. Something deep. He believed the heads were part of a triadic ritual system. The third head, the one found near the school and then vanished, was the key. You don't bury a single relic. You bury three. One to draw it. One to bind it. One to break the lock. That's when the sightings got worse. April 17, 1971. Hexham, Prudhoe, and Alnwick, 3 towns miles apart. All reported sightings of a large, upright creature walking along the road between 3 o'clock and 4 a.m. Descriptions were nearly identical. 6 to 7 feet tall, dark, fur-covered, long arms, and a twisting, contorted face like it was made of moving stone. One motorist said, "It was walking but glitching, like someone changing a channel through its body." The local press ran headlines. Werewolf of the North, ritual relic linked to sightings. But official sources denied any connection. Police said it was a hoax, even as residents began leaving town. Back at the university, Professor Iles began to write in glossolalia, fluid, syntax-based gibberish. But when his students compared the writings to ancient Ogham runes, there were disturbing overlaps. One student said, "It wasn't gibberish. It was layered meaning. He was writing in sound, not sight." Another noticed a symbol repeating in every page. A spiral encircled by 2 dots. The same pattern etched on the underside of one of the heads. Then Iles disappeared. One morning, he simply didn't show up to class. His office was locked from the inside. When security forced the door, they found both stone heads on the desk, a pool of water on the floor, and a note burned around the edges. The heads are not the curse. They're the message. Professor Iles was never found. But a week later, a park ranger near Kielder Forest reported something horrifying. "I saw a man with a stag's skull for a head. He was walking like his joints weren't human. And when I looked away, he was right beside me." One last thing was left in Iles' office. A cassette tape labeled Head Language Transmission 3. When played, it was mostly static, but slowed down, a deep sound emerged. A chant. Rough translation by audio linguists who later refused to comment publicly produced this. The eye opens. The flesh walks. The sealed tomb cracks. One is missing. Find the third. Make the circle. Feed the mouth. After that, the university sealed the office. The heads were placed in a secure archive. But in the logbook, a single word was later scribbled in red pen. They moved again. Late April 1971. Following the disappearance of Professor Roger Iles, the stone heads were placed into secure storage in a university vault. But a month later, the archivist who logged them quit his job without explanation. When contacted for a follow-up, he said only, "I won't touch them again. They're not stone. They're mouths." And then he hung up. Meanwhile, 30 miles north of Hexham, in a disused chapel library, a church records clerk named Evelyn Roach was sorting through documents from the 1800s when she found a reference to something strange. A letter from 1842, written by a parish priest in Hexham, read, "We have reinterred the 3 heads beneath the northern cairn as instructed. There shall be no circle and no flesh to walk again. May their voices remain buried." Evelyn, unfamiliar with the Hexham head story, grew curious. She asked her supervisor. He told her, "There's a reason we stopped building over that hill. Nothing grows there." That same week, a local hiker stumbled upon an ancient cairn, a circular stone structure just beyond the old Roman wall. It had recently collapsed after a heavy rain. Inside the cairn, a hollow space, a circle of flat stones, and at the center, what appeared to be a shallow cavity, empty. But there was something carved into the walls. 3 rough faces, one grinning, one frowning, one shattered. That night, the hiker went missing. 2 days later, his body was found 14 miles away in a tree. Naked, hands clawed, mouth frozen in a scream. His shoes were beside the body, placed neatly. And in one of the saws, a spiral had been scratched in with a fingernail. The police ruled it exposure. But Evelyn knew better. She kept reading. She discovered an 1880 entry in a burial ledger labeled only Hexam/3 Sentinels/do not exhume. And beneath it, the chilling phrase, let the beast have no face. She went public. A local journalist interviewed her for the Hexam Chronicle. The headline, Lost Church Record Suggests Ancient Curse Buried Beneath Town. The article ran for one day. Then it was pulled. The editor claimed legal concerns. That night, the journalist who wrote it suffered a seizure during sleep. He survived, but never wrote again. Meanwhile, new sightings of the creature were emerging weekly. But now the descriptions were changing. People began reporting a man-shaped figure with a mask-like face, still, stone-like, smiling too wide, as if the head had been placed onto something else. One woman in Hexam said, "It didn't blink, just watched me through the window. I thought it was a statue until it moved. Then came the fire. A farmhouse on the outskirts of Hexam burned to the ground. Inside were 3 tenants, one survived." She told paramedics. "It came in through the chimney. It was wearing a face I knew, but it wasn't him anymore. It smiled. Then the fire started. Back at the university, the vault was opened for inventory. The 2 known heads were gone, replaced with a single stone hand curled into a fist, and a note scratched into the cabinet wall. The 3rd has been found. The circle wakes." Experts in folklore reviewed the evidence and released a confidential report. They believed the Hexam heads were part of a pre-Roman funerary rite meant to contain a local spirit of vengeance, possibly a chimeric entity drawn from grief and violence. The heads, they theorized, were one to channel, one to bind, one to distract. If all 3 were separated, the ritual collapsed. And now, they were moving, all on their own. May 1971. As panic grew in Hexam, paranormal researchers from across the UK began arriving, some curious, others terrified. One of them, Dr. Lillian Hart, was a respected parapsychologist from London who had investigated dozens of hauntings across Britain. She came not to debunk, but to listen. Her goal was to capture what she believed were low-frequency transmissions from the heads, a theory proposed after several researchers experienced identical dreams when staying near the objects. "It's not just about ghosts," she told the BBC. "It's about patterns, recurring loops. The heads repeat something. The question is, what?" She was granted access to the 2 recovered heads, which had mysteriously reappeared at a local museum after vanishing from the university. No one could explain how they returned. No security footage. No forced entry. Just a note left at the front desk. "You'll never keep them apart. They belong to it now." Dr. Hart set up equipment, EM recorders, thermal sensors, and a reel-to-reel tape machine in a sealed room. For the first 72 hours, nothing. Then, on the 4th night, everything changed. At 3:33 a.m., her reel-to-reel began recording on its own. Dr. Hart was asleep. Alone. When she awoke and played it back, she heard 1. Low vibrations. 2. A slow, rhythmic thudding, like breathing inside stone. 3. And then, a voice. Not hers. Not human. The words were muffled, ancient-sounding, but translated phonetically by a linguist. "The shape is not the face. The voice is not the name. I will wear the one who listens." Dr. Hart collapsed the next day. She was found unconscious in her hotel bathtub, water still running. She survived. But when she woke, she couldn't speak English. She spoke in the same guttural syllables from the tape. And when shown the stone heads, she began sobbing and laughing at once. She was never the same again. Her husband had her institutionalized by June. Then came the photo. A wildlife photographer, Dennis Wright, was hiking near Hadrian's Wall when he captured a figure in the fog, tall, humanoid, and partially obscured. When he enhanced the image, he saw the figure's hands were reversed, thumbs inward. Its legs were bent like it was learning how to walk. And most disturbing of all, its face was smooth. Too smooth. Like stone stretched over bone. Its eyes glowed faint yellow in the photo. Wright swore. It turned as if it heard the shudder. He developed the film 3 times. The figure remained unchanged, unexplainable. The tabloids had a field day. The Hexam Golem. Stone-faced stalker, ancient entity loose in Northumberland. But behind the scenes, others were taking it more seriously. A retired mod employee, identity withheld, gave a private interview to a university researcher. He claimed that in 1969, 2 years before the heads were found, We recovered a third artifact during an underground dig near Catterick. It was classified. It hummed. It gave off heat but had no energy source. It was marked with 3 eyes. We lost it. He said the item was passed to a research facility that no longer exists. Its last known location? In a van en route to RAF Bulmer. The van crashed. No bodies were recovered, but the black box recorded laughter, childlike and cruel, just before the signal cut. This matched what Dr. Hart had said during her breakdown. It plays with memory. It walks like us, but it's wearing the idea of us. One final clue emerged. A sound technician analyzing Hart's recordings ran the voice through a sonographic display. It revealed a shape hidden in the waveform, a spiral with 3 points. When he inverted the audio and increased speed, the voice whispered, "You drew it. You let it see you. The mouth is open again." That night, his recording studio burned to the ground. Only one thing was recovered. A melted microphone. Inside it, fused to the wiring, was a third miniature stone head. June 1971. Hexham, UK. Locals had stopped walking the old roads. Farmers abandoned fields closest to Reed Avenue where the first heads were unearthed. Strange sounds had begun echoing through the woods at night. Stone scraping on stone. Heavy breathing. Laughter, deep and low. Those who heard it didn't sleep again. Meanwhile, a historical geographer, Dr. Clara Elwood, was hired by Northumberland County to map ancient religious sites in the region. She was not aware of the Hexham Head story, but as she compiled data, she noticed something strange. 3 of the oldest burial mounds, one in Hexham, one in Bellingham, one in Audubon, formed a perfect triangle. At the center, a featureless plot of land. Untouched, privately owned by the Church of England. Unmapped, restricted access. She filed for access. Denied. Within 48 hours, she received a visit from 2 men in plain suits. No names. No credentials. They told her, "The land contains cultural sensitivities. Leave it alone." One of them handed her a folded piece of paper before leaving. It had no words, only a spiral. 3 black dots forming a triangle around it. At the bottom, handwritten, "The heads are not idols. They are anchors." Simultaneously, in town, strange symbols began appearing in chalk. On doorsteps, on fences, on cars. Always the same, a spiral with 3 points. People tried washing them off. By morning, they reappeared freshly drawn as if from the inside out. That week, the second photo of the creature surfaced. A man named Timothy Shaw was taking a long exposure shot at the tree line outside Hexham at 3:15 a.m. The photo developed normally except for a shape in the center. The same tall, humanoid figure seen weeks before. But in this frame, it was looking directly at the camera. Its face wasn't the same. Frame 1, smooth stone, no expression. Frame 2, same body, same pose, but the face had changed. It looked like a human man, mouth wide, screaming, as if frozen in terror. Frame 3, back to stone. Timothy checked his equipment. No glitch. Experts verified the negatives were unaltered. One called it the most disturbing image I've ever seen. It's not changing shape, it's showing you what it wears. Fear gripped Hexham. But no one would speak publicly now. Too many had already suffered. The photographer from Part 5, Dennis Wright, found drowned in a dry riverbed. The historian Evelyn Roach admitted to a psychiatric unit, repeating, "The stone is hungry," over and over. 2 local priests vanished on a walk near the cairn. The police called them missing persons. Locals called them swallowed. Behind the scenes, the UK Ministry of Defence quietly issued a restricted order. All access to sites adjacent to ancient cairns in Northumberland to be monitored. If any recovered objects match description of HEX Head 1, 2, or 3, contain and report. Do not separate. They called it Operation Sentinel. Publicly, they blamed it on structural instability in old Roman walls. But locals reported military trucks, sealed tents, and radar equipment being driven deep into the woods. A man claiming to be a former mod contractor later stated, "They weren't measuring sound. They were measuring movement underground." That night, a child walking past the closed-off field near Hexham saw something behind the fencing. She told her mother. There was a man with no face. He waved, but his hand wasn't connected. When asked to draw it, she produced 3 shapes. A spiral, a triangle, and a single head grinning. Late June 1971. Hexham, England. As the sightings increased, Father Malcolm Horne, a retired priest with an interest in ancient folklore, came out of seclusion. He had followed the reports in silence. The disappearances, the spiral symbols, the the shifting faces. But the final straw was a note left on his doorstep. It was written in ash. "The mask smiles now. We've stopped praying." He opened his personal archive, a private collection of old Anglican documents, Celtic scrolls, and church-sanctioned pagan suppressions. Among them, he found an entry labeled, "Mouth-binding rite, stone-face doctrine, 1221 AD." It described a creature without a name, a mimic beast from pre-Christian times. It lived beneath the high fields, wearing the grief of men, and was bound by 3 faces of stone carved in its image. The ritual? It required all 3 heads present, a mirror circle drawn in salt, and a speaker to name the mouth but not feed it. The warning: do not speak its shape aloud. It learns through sound. It copies through thought. Father Horn believed the heads were no longer artifacts, they were reactivated anchors leaking out something the rite had once contained. He contacted mob officials who ignored him. He contacted the church who called it folk superstition. So he did the unthinkable. He went to the press. In a local paper's Sunday edition, a small article appeared. Priest claims ancient evil loosed by Hexam heads, ritual may be only hope. It was dismissed as fringe nonsense. But within 72 hours, a military vehicle arrived at his home. The priest disappeared. His house was burned down under electrical fault claims. The only thing recovered was a single scorched page from his archive. It read, "The mouth opens when the spiral is walked. The face is worn like linen. You are what it becomes." Meanwhile, in a recording studio in Newcastle, a sound engineer named Andrew Brill had acquired one of the early audio tapes taken from the heads by Dr. Lillian Hart, Part 5. He ran it in reverse. What came out was not music, not language. It was a scream modulated into rhythm. Within 12 minutes of exposure, Brill began convulsing. By the time he reached hospital care, he had lost all vision. Neurologists found no physical damage. His last words before sedation: "It blinked before me. I saw its face. It was mine." A new order was issued, this time not from the government, from someone higher. Agents began collecting spiral drawings, door to door, claiming it was part of a safety exercise, asking parents to report children who drew symbols they didn't understand. Some complied, others refused, and those who refused started vanishing. One mother, whose son had drawn the spiral in condensation on a school bus window, was found catatonic 3 days later. Her son was never found. She whispered only, "He drew its eye." It looked back. A leaked document from inside a defense contractor showed the spiral symbol printed across a classified schematic. The label: Hexbound 3// containment breach radius theoretical. And beneath it, the final line: if it finds its 3rd mask, the face will walk the land again. Early July 1971. The spiral was appearing more frequently. In frost, in puddles, even carved lightly into mirrors. Residents began to speak quietly of the 3rd face. Not a relic, not a carving. A thing, alive, shifting, mimicking. Seen at night in gardens, behind windows, or in reflections that didn't match the room. A boy named Thomas Gill, 13, was walking home from a late film in Hexham when he saw it. At first, he thought it was a man standing under a lamppost, motionless. Then he realized something was off. It wasn't breathing. It didn't blink. It was like a copy of a person. Like someone tried to remember a face and built it wrong. He looked away just for a second. When he looked back, it was gone. But on the pavement beneath the lamppost was a small indentation in the shape of a head, like stone had rested there. 3 days later, another sighting 40 miles away in Morpeth. A farmer said he saw a child-sized figure in his field. It had 3 faces, each turning independently. 2 were smiling. 1 was screaming. He chased it. It vanished into a copse of trees. When police investigated, they found 3 animal skulls stacked vertically, a spiral burned into the grass, and a small, round stone buried just beneath the soil. They took it for analysis. When placed under a blacklight, markings emerged, the same patterns as the original Hexam heads. But this one was different. It seemed warmer, and it was wet. Later that night, the stone went missing from police custody. Security footage showed no one entering, but the camera caught something else. At 3:33 a.m., the image distorted. For 4 seconds, the hallway camera flickered and something stood in frame. Something tall, head cocked, face blurred like static. Then it disappeared. A sound engineer reviewing nearby audio recordings picked up something faint, layered in environmental noise. A voice repeating a name. Michael, Michael. Michael. There was no one named Michael on the shift roster, but it was the name of the officer's father who had died 2 years earlier. The voice matched his exact tone. Back in Hexham, an elderly gravedigger named Harold Wykes came forward with a secret. He said he knew where the third head was originally buried. He had helped seal the crypt below St. Albans Church in 1945, under strict instructions from the diocese. No one had been inside in over 25 years, but he remembered the carvings. They weren't Christian. They were watching faces in the stone. 3 of them. One looked just like the smiling head from the news. With pressure from researchers, the church finally allowed access to the crypt. Inside, they found a stone altar carved with spirals and humanoid figures. 3 recesses in the wall, 2 empty, a one still containing a heavily eroded head. When photographed, the camera malfunctioned. When drawn by hand, the artist went into seizure. What she sketched before passing out. A face half human, half erased, as if in mid-transition. And beneath the altar, one final message carved in Latin. The mouth will borrow the breath of the willing. If the faces are scattered, it must walk. If the faces are gathered, it will speak. That night, a mirror in a Hexham pub cracked without impact. The bartender saw his reflection smile at him before he did. Later, in the CCTV recording, you can faintly see someone behind him. Figure, face blank, stone gray. Then the footage corrupts. The next morning, 3 identical eyewitness reports came from different towns. A tall figure, grinning, walking silently down the middle of the road, his shadow bent in the wrong direction. Each witness described the same thing. It looked like someone I lost, but the eyes were full of stone. Mid-July 1971. After months of quiet horror, the 3 stone heads had reappeared, each under different circumstances. A one returned itself to the Robson house. A one was pulled from beneath a police station floor. And the third was found by a child in a stream, humming faintly in her hands. They were brought independently to the town museum for safekeeping. No one noticed the coincidence, but the heads did. Within hours of the 3 being housed together for the first time since 1971, something began to shift in Hexham. A low-frequency hum could be heard by anyone within 3 blocks of the museum. Dogs howled. Phones rang without calls. Mirrors vibrated on their hooks. And then, the dreams began. One woman, 74-year-old Nora Sims, described it best. You're standing in a hallway. You see yourself at the other end. She waves. Then you wake up with soil on your hands. Others had dreams of digging, of unearthing something that spoke in their voice, of finding a 4th head not made of stone but mirror. The dreams weren't just in Hexham anymore. They spread to nearby towns, then to cities, then abroad. People thousands of miles away who had never heard of the Hexham heads began reporting recurring spirals, unknown faces, something that looked like them, but smiled too wide. Then came the first new photo. A tourist from Manchester visiting the town took a picture of the museum's exterior. In the glass reflection behind her, a figure stood inside. It wore her own face. She hadn't entered the building, but the figure had her scarf, her posture, her expression, except the eyes were pure black and the mouth was curled wrong. She deleted the photo, but the image kept reappearing in her cloud storage, over and over. Each time, the face got closer to the glass. At the same time, a man named Gareth Knowles checked himself into a sleep study at Newcastle Medical Hospital. He said he couldn't stop seeing the heads in his dreams. But more disturbing, he'd begun hearing a voice through his own voice. During one session, Gareth fell asleep at 2:47 a.m. At 3:33 a.m., his brain activity spiked, off the charts. He sat bolt upright and spoke. I have borrowed this vessel. It is awake. You will not know what was yours until I've worn it. Then he began to laugh in 3 different voices, one high, one guttural, and one exactly matching his mother's. She died in 1969. He remained in a coma after that night. Doctors found no explanation. The EG monitor flatlined when they tried playing the sound of running water, the same kind the third head had been found near. Meanwhile, the museum where the heads were kept closed without explanation. Staff refused to return. One claimed, "They're not heads, they're lures." Another wrote in her resignation letter, "Every time I blink, one of them moves." And yet, no security footage ever captured a single shift. Then, one night, the heads disappeared again. No break-in, no theft. The museum security system froze at 3:33 a.m. When it came back online, the heads were gone. But one final image was saved from the corrupted feed. A figure, tall, faceless, standing in the middle of the archive room, and just faintly on the polished glass of a nearby display case. Your face. Late July 1971. Hexham. The town was silent. Shops closed early. Churches locked during daylight. People spoke in whispers if they spoke at all. No one mentioned the spiral. No one mentioned the faces. Because everyone had seen them now. Not just in dreams. In glass. In puddles. In the dark corner of their own reflections, blinking half a second too late. The government closed the museum without explanation. Military trucks removed what they could. But the heads? They were gone. Again. Except they weren't. They were appearing. Not the originals. Replicas. Crude, handmade, primitive. In cities far from Hexham. On a bus stop bench in Leeds. In the middle of a park in Berlin. Outside a daycare in Ontario. All identical in style. Grinning. Frowning. Blank. No one knew who made them. Some were warm to the touch. Some whispered names when held to the ear. One was caught on CCTV turning slightly overnight, facing the front door of the building by morning. Then came the broadcasts. Across the UK and later in parts of Europe, shortwave radio stations began picking up a low droning hum beneath weather and news reports. Hidden in the hum. A pattern. Not a voice. Not a signal. A face. When run through a spectrograph, the audio revealed a shape. A stone face grinning, its eyes wide, its spiral faint behind it. It wasn't just audio. One night, during a test pattern transmission from a BBC affiliate, viewers saw something else. A flash, only a frame. A face. Not a human one. Not fully, but too close, too familiar, and too awake. The BBC denied it, but bootleg tapes of the transmission surfaced. Each playback distorted the sound system. One tape collector claimed the footage wouldn't stop replaying even after the TV was unplugged. He smashed the screen. Inside the crack? A spiral. Final reports trickled in from all over the world. In each, one constant remained. It wasn't wearing a face. It was wearing memory. In early August, a cassette tape was unearthed beneath the ruins of the Robson home. The house had been torn down, but under the floorboards buried in salt was a small wooden box. Inside, a tape labeled only. Mouth // final entry. When played, this is what it said. Click. Static. Then the sound of stone sliding. Then a voice, not Cindy's, not anyone's. But something. We are what you forgot. We wore your grief. We wore your stories. We waited until you named us again. Now you carry us. In mirrors. In dreams. In sound. We are still smiling. And click. Since then, the heads have never been recovered. But they are still reported. Sitting on windowsills. Appearing in basements. Showing up in thrift stores unmarked, unpriced. And wherever one is seen, the spiral follows. And behind it, a figure. Tall. Wearing someone's face. Sometimes yours. There was never a ritual to destroy them. Only to bind. And now the spiral has unwound.